Hello everyone, this is Sumit Srivastava, an international rated chess player and a professional chess coach. So today we are going to discuss another topic which is about creating threats in chess. Both creating them and in fact responding to them are at the heart of the game of chess itself. Since chess is a turn-based game, you got to be very careful with what you do with each one of your moves. The most important thing which I'm going to tell you that the threat is perhaps the most powerful tool available to every chess player. If you create more threats than your opponent can deal with, then you will simply win on the spot. So to begin with, we are going to take a look at this position here, and I want to show you one of the reasons why threats can be so powerful. So for instance, a common mistake in this position, which by the way is a drawn position of course, may change the result. The reason is because the material is approximately equal. Rook, bishop and pawn for black, queen for white, and neither side can really make any sort of breakthrough. For example, the white queen by herself, and notice that this pawn on g2 is not really going anywhere. The white queen by herself cannot overpower the rook, bishop and two kingside pawns, and on the other hand, black cannot create any serious threats against the white. So for instance, the only thing you might imagine is if somehow black could take the rook and the bishop and gang up against this pawn here on g2 by doing something like bishop to b7 and placing the rook either along the second rank or along the g file. But first of all, in that event, white could simply respond to the threat by pushing the pawn on g3, and there would be a lot safer because it would lie on a dark square and it would be immune to the c8, the light squared bishop. In addition to this, white could just begin to check the opponent. Then it would be very difficult for the black king to avoid the checks of the white queen, or indeed some other threats against the pieces. But let's imagine that you were in an actual tournament situation and you found yourself in this position. How should you play? Well, the first move that might come to mind is move queen e3. This seems logical because it gives a check. However, one thing to notice is that after the response bishop to e6, there are very few threats that you can create against the enemy position. Notice how this whole structure is very compact. The pawn is defending the bishop and the g6 pawn, while the f7 pawn itself is being defended not just by the king but also by the bishop on e6 as well. So it's very difficult for the white queen to make any threats of value against this structure. The one thing you might keep in mind is this rook on h8 can be somehow target. Well, sure, you could play a move like queen to e5. There you would be creating a threat, but because it's a single threat, black can just respond with a move like rook to h5. And now everything is defended. Everything is extremely compact now. In general, when you have a couple of pieces against the queen, this is what you want. The queen is very good at targeting any loose points in the opponent's position. So let's return to the starting position and we notice that a move like queen e3 actually carries no threats at all, because all it is a check. Black can simply block it. Let's imagine instead queen to c1. This would be a smart practical choice. And the reason for this is that here we really do have a threat that, unlike in the case of check, black may forget to respond to. So for instance, if black played the move f6, then queen takes to bishop. Suddenly it's game over. And additionally, the reason why it's a little bit of a tricky move. But let's imagine that now black addresses the threat by placing his bishop on d7. Then again, there would be no threat at all. Here once again, white has a choice of moves he can play. One possibility would be a move like queen to c3, hoping that black forgets all about this rook. But once again, it's a single move threat. So after move like rook to h5, once again, black has consolidated his position. Instead, a trickier move might be a move like queen to f4 or queen to g5. The reason is that this move here actually creates a little bit more of a disguised threat, which is queen e5 with check. It's a little bit less obvious than a move like queen to c3, which simply straight up attacks the rook. Now if black were, for instance, to drop the bishop back to its starting square at c8, then queen e5 check would win the rook in the game. Even smarter than that would be to play the move queen to f4. This creates a double threat. The first move is queen e5 check, exactly like in the queen g5 line, but additionally white now has this threat of queen b8 check, picking up the rook by screwing it. So in the other words, queen g5 only threatened a fork on the rook. Queen f4 is a better practical choice because it threatens both a fork and a skewer. So therefore, we are really touching upon the importance of creating multiple threats in this case. White is better off creating two. But nevertheless, after moves such as rook to h5, we see that both the threat of queen e5 and the threat of queen b8 have been parried by black, and so it should be a draw very soon. Therefore, if we were once again in this starting position, we might, rather than go with a move like queen to c1, we might try to play a move that immediately creates a double threat, like on this bishop and this rook by queen to c3. And that cannot be as easily stopped. Now move like rook to h5 would lose the bishop, and if we move the bishop, you lose the rook. In fact, here black has only one response, and every other move would lose, as only if he can play kingside castle. By castling, he steps his rook away and onto f8, and the rook very conveniently defends the bishop on c8. This therefore would end up being a draw. So here white has not gotten too far. The final way in which we might add a little bit of venom to our threats is if we notice that the move we would like to play is met by a strong response such as kingside castle, we might play a move like queen to d6 or even queen to c5 in order to create a threat but not allow the move the response that bothers us. And an improvement over queen d6 would indeed be in queen to c5 because this creates a primary threat and it also contains an additional somewhat masked secondary threat. Now, unlike in the first example that we saw with the move queen to c1, here if black plays the move bishop to d7, he would lose to the secondary threat. And since he cannot castle, some opponents might play a move like king to d8, here to defend the bishop and sidestep the fork on e5. And here we have another benefit of a move like queen to c5, which is that in the event of a possible choice by black, he would be setting himself for another trap. This is something that expert players are just fantastic doing. They create a lot of threats, and sooner or later many players fall victim to the pressure that generates. The best player in the world at the moment, Magnus Carlsen, is especially renowned for just posing problem after problem to even some of the world's best. So instead in this position, Black should play a move such as bishop to e6. And now fortunately for him, he will be okay. The move rook to h5 is coming up next. And after that, it will simply be a draw. Well, in this video, I covered the basics of creating threats and responding to them. I hope you liked and enjoyed watching. Thank you.